Hey, how's it going? How you doing, everybody? So today it is Friday, October 28th, just before Halloween. So happy Halloween. All right, guys. So today I want to talk to you about embossing, debossing. This class is just getting you started on embossing, debossing, answering any questions that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to ask anybody. So I know we always kick this class off. If you get a chance, just go ahead and comment where you're watching and listening from. It's always great. We had some people coming in from as far as Egypt, which is pretty far from me, Australia, New Zealand, and of course here across the US. So it's always great to see where everybody's coming in from. But we've all seen amazing uses of embossing and debossing on packaging. Sometimes as designers, we're a little bit intimidated by these processes that we may not understand or we may have never used in the past. And even if you've used them, sometimes you're a little afraid to be the person that's asking the question everybody wants to ask. And I know in terms of, so we got Rick coming in from Bristol. Awesome, dude. Thanks so much for chiming in and let us know where you're coming in from. So let's see how far we can get as far away from Tennessee as possible. See if we can get all the way around the other side of the planet. But as designers, sometimes we don't want to be that one person that asks the questions that everybody else wants to ask because we don't want to sound stupid. But it's not stupid to ask these questions. So just, I'm always the one that's going up to the pressman going, hey, why are you doing this? As simple as it may seem, one, you're going to get a story. Two, they're definitely going to be helpful. And whatever it is that you learn on press or when you're working with other designers and seeing what they're doing, it just makes you that much better. So I want to make sure that we have that opportunity today. So let's just ask those questions, right? What exactly is an emboss, right? We're going to talk about spot embossing, not like an overall texture emboss. That comes in with like cylinders and different plate options. But in terms of what we're talking about, embossing is just like your typical emboss. So what is an emboss? I've got this example here. You can see the word yes on here. This has, this is pretty flat. And then this is raised. So embossing is really taking a substrate between two plates, essentially, that one has a male shape and one has a female shape, and you're pressing it and you're stretching those fibers. Now there's different depths that we can do this at. There are different styles that we can do these in. And I'm going to share my screen here just to show you a few different types. Excuse me, just a few different types. Let's see. We got somebody coming in from New Jersey. That's pretty far from Tennessee. It's far from me. I'm in Arizona. We got Oklahoma. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And if you guys are familiar with embossing or you've never done embossing, I'd love to know as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let's just talk about the different types of emboss. All right, so you can see this here. I'm going to zoom in. I put this together just briefly this morning. And my shortcuts in Illustrator kind of screw up my shortcuts in this presentation. But all right, so we got different embossing types. So you've got your embossing die. This is typically a hard die, a metal. Your counter die is going to be, it's still hard, but it has a little bit more flexibility to it. It'll be some type of a plastic. Now I've seen them done where it's copper. There's some kind of a soft metal, and the reason is you're pushing through. You don't want it to be metal on metal, which can create that a tear happening. So there's different types of embossing. You've got a rounded emboss, right? It's pretty round. You're going to see that on logos where what that does is it's going to help the light cascade around that shape. It's not going to be as aggressive of an emboss. Um, you've got a multi-level emboss, which has multiple levels. And I'm just showing two. So you've got this depth and then you've got this depth here. Oh, I see that, Rick, you're saying that they're doing that on paper labels. You know what? That they're doing that instead of labels. Embossing looks really amazing, especially if you're doing it as what's called a blind emboss. And a blind emboss is when there's no artwork for the emboss to align to, right? So, for example, like this here, you can see there's a yes has a shine to it. That is that's a combination emboss, so it actually has a clear foil on top of it. But it's a blind emboss. Like there's no printed artwork that we're trying to align to. So the only visual is the emboss, and it gives you a really beautiful tone on tone effect. Um, you've also got this like bevel emboss, and a bevel, it gives you those angles. There's always going to be a set range of what an acceptable angle is. I think it's between 20 and 30 degrees. Anything sharper than that, you're going to get tearing happening. Um, you know, Cariana, I love blind emboss. It's beautiful. Definitely gives you an elevated look because it's so subtle. I'm just going to turn this down here just a second. Then you've got this shape here. It depends on who you talk to and how smart they're trying to sound. Basically, this comes to a point, right? This is like your Roman, like when you see I don't know, like in the Gladiator movie, right? When you see things chiseled in to stone, it comes to a point. That's why it's called a chisel emboss. Some people call it an apex emboss because it comes to a point. There's also a pyramidal emboss because it looks like a pyramid from a cross section. There's another term for it as well. I can't recall what it was at the moment. But basically, it just comes to a point, right? It's a chisel emboss. It looks like it's been chiseled in. These are great because it's going to be a much more aggressive emboss than your rounded emboss. Again, if it's rounded, the light hits it, it's going to cascade over. So it'll be a nice, smooth emboss. With a bevel, you're going to get the two sides. You're going to cast a really hard shadow on one, catch a lot of light on the other. So you're going to get three different colors happening on that emboss, which is really nice. Apex chisel emboss is going to be really aggressive. Half of it's going to be in light, half of it's going to be in shadow, and it's going to really stand out. And then you can get into some different, and I'll make this document available if anybody's interested in it. Just let me know in the comments if you'd like a copy of it. I'm happy to share it with you. I think it took me like 20 minutes rushing like a crazy person before this class to make sure I had it ready for you. But a sculpted emboss, like that's going to be where the texture isn't angled, isn't specific. It can be a photograph, right? Where maybe like the eyes are pressed out, or they're rounded in some areas or pointed in other areas. That's going to require some hand chiseling. Like somebody's actually sitting there, shaping this thing out to get all the proper shapes and make sure that there's no area there that's going to either break on the die, which can happen, or punch through the paper, which can also happen. And then you've got this emboss deboss combination, which I'll show you an example of that. This is where you're pressing up on some areas and you're pressing down on other areas. Now, if you want, I'm going to give you a tip, which I did not include in here, but it's my favorite. This is my favorite, and it works on any of these guys. But I'm going to go ahead and create this guy down here. When you're doing a emboss, there's limitations to how far you can press it out because your paper can tear. Just however hard you push it, it can rip. It's not there's not a whole lot to it. What I love doing is what's going to make it look like this emboss is sticking out like 5 inches off the paper. Because I think you can get, I can't remember the number of microns you can press out. I think it's 50, which is, pretty drastic. But if you really want to make your emboss stand out, this is what's called a snap line. And a snap line is when you actually deboss the edge around your emboss. And what that's doing is it's pressing the paper down, half a millimeter around the emboss. It's pressing it in, and then the paper is being pressed up to create that emboss. And what happens is either I'm getting a lot of wind out here or there's a gigantic truck going by my house. What's going to happen is you're pressing in these edges all the way around this emboss. It's going to catch shadow right around the edge. So right where the light starts coming out, right wherever your emboss is raised, it'll catch a shadow all the way around it, and it'll make it look like it's standing out even more. It doesn't cost you any more to do it, but it makes that impact that you're looking for. And if you're doing packaging, this is something you definitely want to do, because when you feel it, no matter how you pick it up, it makes a huge, huge difference. So I wanted to kind of share, I want to share you a few different examples as well of different types of embossing and it being applied, so you can kind of get a good feel for these as well. I'm going to pull this thing up here because I've got a bunch of pictures here to share with you. Oh, it sounds like this truck's coming back. Must be popular with trucks today. All right. So here's a chisel emboss. I love this example. You can't see it, but I'm going to share it with you. Here you go. All right. So I love this chisel emboss example because you can see it's right at the peak, right? You're getting a hard shadow on one side, you're getting a light shadow on the other, or you're getting the light reflection on the other side. You're getting a really crisp presentation of what's happening here. Then you've got, I'm going to show you this one here. Got some crazy trucks going around here. All right, so I'm going to show you this close-up of this Yes bag. And the reason I'm going to show you this is because this one uses a lot of these all in one. Let's see, maybe I do this instead. All right, so you can see everything. So, all right, so this is a close-up of this Yes bag that I was showing you. And you can see here, you've got this apex, pyramidal, roof line. That's what the other term was. You can see this here, how it comes to a point. On the outside edge, we've got a deboss, a snap line. It's actually pressing it in. So you can see how the paper, the level of the paper is here, and then down here, it goes further down. And with it going further down, again, it makes this thing stand out so much. We also have this faux shadow, which is debossed in. That's giving you, again, it gives you a sense that this emboss is raised, that this Yes is like busting out of this paper. This is a combination die because now it's a deboss for this area and it's an emboss for this part. It's also a combination in that we've got this, it's sculpted and textured, which gives you like all these little lines. It gives you this little faux shading, like a halftone shading that's done here. And you can see how, when creating this, when I created this die, and I created this for the team over at idpdirect.com, you can check out, I'm going to show you the artwork and actually show you how it was set up so you can see how to set these files up. But the reason to create a die, a embossing texture like this is when it's on shelf, right? So when this is on shelf, no matter which direction the consumer is coming, and I talk about this a lot, is if you're competing on shelf, we always think about the pack like straight on and the way that it looks to us on screen. We've got to make sure the logo is in the right position, the color is right. Um, we've got hierarchy in terms of what we're communicating. But the thing with packaging is that not every consumer is walking up, is walking down the shelf like this, like staring at the shelf. You're going to stand you're going to, when you're grocery shopping, when you're whatever shopping, electronic shopping, you go to the end of the aisle because you're looking down the aisle for your product. And when you look down the aisle, you're seeing everything at an angle. You're not seeing everything straight on. So when you're looking at things at an angle, you need something that's going to catch the light, reflect differently than everything else on shelf, because that's where your eye is going to go to. You're going to use color, you can use texture, but texture, like an emboss like this, makes a huge difference. I'm holding this at an angle and you can still read yes. You can read it here, actually a little bit less when you're head on, depending on where the light is. But when you're at an angle, like this really stands out and there's no color, right? So that's the power of an emboss, is that you can actually catch light and reflect it in different directions. You're in control of which way that light reflects, and you're in control of how that consumer gets attracted to it. Not only that, once they pick it up, you've got the tactile component to this, right? When you feel this, you're feeling all those different edges. It feels different than anything else. It catches the light differently than anything else. And you've only got, what do we say? We've got 3 seconds to catch that consumer's eyes. I think it's even less than that now, because as they're walking down the aisle, they're looking at their phone. So you've probably got half a second to really catch their eye. So embossing, debossing is a great way to add texture, a great way to catch that consumer's eye. Not only that, but if you look at your high-end brands like Burberry, they used to have a beautiful chisel emboss logo. It all becomes part of the brand assets, is how not only that it was a chisel emboss, but the angle of the emboss, the depth of it, like that was just a standard. And a lot of brands do that. It's like they set this standard so that no matter where you see it, where you pick it up, it's consistent. And again, it's just a way to build your branding. So let me show you, like, how do you set up this file? So I'm going to show you the file for yes, since I do have that. And if you've got any questions, if you've set up embossing in the past and you've had issues with it, or you're curious about how I've done anything I've done here or anything I've shared, or if you've got examples of your own, throw it in the comments. Would love to hear about it. So here's this document, and I've set it up in Illustrator. Most companies that are producing embossing, embossing dies, or factories that are producing packaging with embossing on it, don't usually use CAD for embossing to create the dies. They're using a different software. So what I like to do is I like to create everything in Illustrator, share it with them, give them as much information as possible, give them the angles, or even ask questions like, how far can I push this? Let them tell me, adjust my artwork to that. But here's the final art. And you can see we've got this area that's pink. We've got this area that is blue. We've got a deep deboss labeled in pink. And then I've got this pyramidal emboss here. Now there's different colors, so it helps you see and helps them see. But if I go into wireframe, everything is specified, like where everything goes, so that they can clearly create this. Right now they've got a map essentially, and then you can see how this comes together. So what you can see from this is that your emboss on the yes is flat and smooth. What I want pressed in has texture. So when it comes together, they're not creating two dies. They're not creating an emboss and a deboss, but I am giving them direction in two simple ways so that they can clearly understand that these two are going to come together and create this smooth surface with texture on it. And this can be done as simple as, if we wanted to do test, and this is a horrible font for embossing because of these really thin little areas, you can get tearing in there. So let's pick something a little fatter. Perfect. So then this is something that you can emboss no problem. Got the pups moving around here. So you got you can emboss this no problem. If we wanted to do this as a deboss, you just create a swatch. If we go into my swatches, yeah, it's pink deboss. I set it to spot color. I can change it whatever color I want. I just like pink because it really stands out and it's not part of the artwork, so that nobody confuses this to be printed. Um, and then when they separate this, they're gonna get a film or a plate. I hope they don't get films anymore. Everybody goes direct to plate. They're gonna get a plate for this that'll say deboss. So there's no chance that they're actually going to print this, um, which is great. Now, if you had this set up and it was still a 4-color process and your artwork was 4-color process, there's a chance that they could print the word test or whatever it is that you've got in a 4-color process, screwing up your entire design. Um, so yeah, so in terms of like embossing, debossing, like why do you want to do it? You want to stop people in their tracks. You want them to see it, touch it, and remember it. What's the difference between embossing and debossing is a question that I get. Is embossing raises the artwork, debossing presses it in, it lowers it. You can use them in combination. Essentially, it's the same thing as that document. It's just flipped. And then the other question I get is, what's the difference between embossing and debossing versus letter pressing? Letterpress is essentially the same thing. As designers, we've all seen letterpressed artwork. We love that feel. You get a nice blotter paper and you press it in and it gives you really crisp lines. That's what you're doing. It's exactly the same thing, except on letterpress, you've got a flat, you've got a flat stock that's heavier. You're pressing it in. If you were to feel the back of that, it's still smooth. On packaging, you're usually doing it on a thinner board, so you're going to press it in, but you're going to feel the reverse side of that kind of pressed through. That's the difference. But the idea is almost 100% the same. With letterpress, typically you only have one side die. You don't have the back end, which catches it. So it's just like pressing in one direction. But the idea is the same. It can give you the same effect. It's funny because I've actually seen some factories that still use letterpress machines that are over 100 years old. Typically not the larger factories, but there's a few different ones that do. There's different equipment that they use for this. There's a clamshell. There's this clamshell press. I'm going to show you here. I'm just showing you my whole screen here because I can't go through all of these guys. But you've got, this is a clamshell. And with this clamshell, it basically smashes that together. You've got a male die and a female die, and they come together and they smash the crap out of the paper or the board, whatever it is that you're using. So then there's other types of there are other types of machines as well. There's this Bopst straight stamp, which this Bopst straight stamp is gigantic. And this one is actually for foiling, but it's the same thing. You run your sheets through. This has, you've got cylinders in there that press the sheet. It rolls out the other side, aligns everything. This is pretty high tech. This is when you're doing large mass production. You're not going to typically see a clamshell when you're doing millions of units. You just can't handle that's just an insane amount of volume. And then I would say the last thing on these guys as we wrap up here is let's see, I kind of go down my list here. I think we kind of hit everything actually. Let's see if I got any other images that would make sense to share here. I do have this one, which is pretty cool. I'd say we'll leave off on this. This is one of my favorite projects I worked on with the team over at Walpole and IDP Direct. You can see this has embossing. It has debossing. This is a really large die. The artwork here was super complex. It basically took this illustration and turned it into embossing and debossing. Again, no ink, complete blind emboss deboss. it gives you just a really, really elevated look. And in that case, that was the panel that was above the book. It was all black packaging. And when you open up that lid, you're hit with the color and essentially the same artwork, but now in full vivid color. Um, so again, if you have any questions on embossing, debossing, let me know. Throw it in the comments. I'm always checking. I'm always answering. If you've got any work that you've done that you're proud of that has embossing or debossing, throw that in the comments too. I'd love to see it. Always looking for great examples of new art and new packaging. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's Friday. It's time to go. All right, guys. We'll see you again. Any questions? Throw them in there. I'll check them out.